Eccoci qua, we are now live.
Ok,
Buonasera ragazzi, buonasera. Stasera siamo con Thomas Rose, direttamente dal team Kuribrohs. Farà un piccolo talk show con Marco, eccoci qua. Ci teniamo a ringraziare Thomas di essere venuto da noi per questo piccolo evento e lascerò tutte nelle mani di Marco. Prego Marco. Thanks
ok.
Thomas.
Ciao ragazzi, anzitutto buonasera. Oggi vi ho portato un ospite speciale. Ci tengo a fare una piccola introduzione, ovvero brevemente, nonostante il mio terribile inglese, parlerò solo in inglese per ovvi motivi, non tradurrò dall'inglese all'italiano. Se volete fare delle domande a Thomas, proverò a tradurle il più velocemente possibile, dopo che ha finito ovviamente di parlare sugli argomenti che andremo a trattare. E niente, Thomas non è attualmente aggiornato sul formato perché ha deciso di prendersi una piccola pausa dal gioco giocato perché è online e quindi vi chiedo di non fare domande sul formato su Eternity Code. So, here we are. Hi Thomas, thank you very much for
Hello.
being here. It's a very big pleasure to have you in our Twitch channel. And so I've already said that you now have take a little bit break in the game, so you are not so update on new format, Eternity Code, and so on. So the topic of our talk show and the aim of our talk show is to give you some insight of the mind of a pro player. Even if Thomas is one of the kindest pro player and the pro player that seems less pro player because he's so chill and so kind, but he has a very big and deep comprehension of the game, and I firmly think that it would be a very great honor to you to listen from Thomas' words. So, Thomas, anything to say because we begin the interview?
Well, thank you for the great introduction. Like, I don't know that I've ever really thought of myself as a pro player as such. I know that I always looked up to those guys when I was first getting into the game, but it feels kind of surreal to have someone be saying those things about me, because I just go to the events and I play them because like that's what I do. It's what my friends do. It's just a fun game.
We already have the first question, like how does it feel to win a WOSIAS and you won two actually?
It's crazy, man. Like, it doesn't sink in at first. Like, even the second time around, I was there and I was just wondering, how did this happen? I knew that I had a good deck. I knew that I was playing well, but even all of that put together, it doesn't prepare you for that feeling at the end of the day where you're not waiting for the next round because you just won the last round.
Yeah. I think that is a wonderful sensation. And so the first question from me to break the ice is one insight on the personal life of Thomas. So what are your interests outside the Yu-Gi-Oh, outside the game? What do you do in your life?
Okay, so I graduated 2 summers ago now. I have a master's in mechanical engineering, and I now work as a control and testing engineer for an electric vehicle company making high performance cars.
Okay. What are your passions outside Yu-Gi-Oh?
I like a lot of games, but it tends to be anything that's slow-paced thought games. So I'm not good at like first-person shooters, but I love board games. I love card games. I love anything that uses the same kind of player interaction that you get from Yu-Gi-Oh. So I've played other card games. I like most card games in general, and yeah, like I enjoy games and I enjoy food. I like going on holiday with my girlfriend and just eating everything that we can find, Like if it's a holiday for me, it's either looking for the best food and the best restaurants and the best cafes with my girlfriend, or it's playing card games. That's why I like.
So I think that when you came to Italy in a Milan YCS would be a great mix of good food and a great experience in game.
Yeah. So the more recent YCS in Milan, I came with friends, and we had just like a big nerds weekend. But then the one in 2018, I came with my girlfriend and we tried some of the restaurants as well, and that was good too. So like they're both good ways to have a weekend away.
Okay, perfect. And so when did you start to play Yu-Gi-Oh and how it happened?
Okay, so I first played with the very first structure decks that got released in Europe, but that was just playing on carpet floor at home against my brothers. And then I guess in maybe the end of 2009 or 2010 would have been when I first went to locals. But I've been playing every event that I can get to kind of since I started playing locals. So at first that was only locals because I would have been 13, 14 years old. So I just got the train into the city near where I lived and played on the weekend. But then as I got a little older, I would get train to regionals if I could get to those. And then I started flying to YCSs and I just got hooked, and I've been playing pretty much non-stop for the last 10 years.
Oh, wonderful. So you have seen a lot of format, a lot of meta games.
Yeah.
Definitely a lot. Some good, some bad.
I sucked for a lot of years. It was a long time before I was actually able to achieve anything because I played awful decks. But I played a lot of events.
And when and how there was the I don't know, the spark that lets you start doing well at events?
Okay, so there are kind of two different times that happened. Firstly, I have always been of a kind of core mindset that I see a lot of players having, where people who aren't the most competitive players sometimes handicap themselves by playing a non-meta deck, and they'll argue that it's the same people that will like call someone else a meta sheep or something because they go out and buy the best deck. I had some of the same mindsets as the people who do that. So when it was 2010, 2011, I played Blackwings, and Blackwings weren't good. This was a couple of years after Blackwings were good. Everyone else was playing Dino Rabbit, and I had Blackwings. And then people moved on to Mermails, and I still had Blackwings. And then people started playing Spellbooks and Dragon Rulers, and I still had Blackwings. So I was playing really bad decks for a lot of years. That said, I'd already topped a YCS at this point. So there was a YCS in 2012 in Sheffield at the end of the year. But that was a battle pack YCS. So I didn't get to build my own deck, which...
I don't know about this because I'm kind of new in the game.
Okay, so
I don't actually know about
way back, Konami released sets called Battle Pack. They were 5-card packs, and they were designed for limited format play. So that's like in Magic the Gathering, they do it a lot more, where people open up booster packs and draft cards from the packs and play with the decks from those new booster packs. But Yu-Gi-Oh hasn't really embraced it in anything like the same way. So we only ever had a few events that I think there were 2 YCSs in Europe that were sealed pack YCSs. And then there was a couple of years where American YCS Top Cuts were sealed pack as well.
Okay.
But I think that was only the top 8, and it was really unpopular. Yu-Gi-Oh players have never been a big fan of sealed format, but I loved it. I really liked the idea of sealed format, and for that event, I made a program just in Excel that randomized the contents of the set and generated an example of the 50 cards that you could get from your 10 booster packs when you start that event. So it was an event that was supposed to be sealed packs, so you had no idea what you're going into it. But I'd already run the event so many times at home. So back then it was Dueling Network before Dueling Book. But I would get with my friends and we'd load up the Excel sheet that I made, generate a random pool from 10 battle pack booster packs, and we'd just play games. So it was the first time that I'd ever gone to an event where everyone had the same chance, because we were all just opening up packs on the day to build our deck from. So I wasn't handicapped by myself. And I'd also practiced loads because I loved the idea of playing a battle pack format. So I tested it and no one else had tested it. So I ended up doing really well at that YCS. I got my first YCS top. I got knocked out in the top 32 by one of my good friends that I always stay with for the events, but it was chill. He went on to get top 8 at that one, so he had a good weekend. But it was another 2 years after that before I was able to do well at constructed format, so events where I actually built my own decks. And that's just because it took me another 2 years to decide that I was bored of losing with my own bad deck and just play something good instead.
So this was your mental shift from a fun player to a competitive player.
I guess that I had always played as if I was a competitive player. I think that I was very good at the game, just playing bad decks. So a lot of the people who play bad decks and feel in some way upset that other people play meta decks, it's often a way of deflecting their own failure. So a lot of those people might try investing in an expensive deck, find that they still lose, and then get tired of it and go back to their own cheaper deck and use it as an excuse for why they didn't perform well. But I kind of feel like I was on the cusp of actually doing really well with awful decks. And it actually taught me a lot of how to play in really bad situations, because if you're playing a bad deck, you're always in a bad situation. So I played very competitively for the amount of handicap that I gave myself. And that sort of made everything really easy when
you shift to a meta deck
and picked up Mermail in 2014, and I went to YCS Paris, and it was just easy. Like, I was just beating everyone. I wondered how it had taken me so long to try playing something real, because suddenly every situation I just had more cards than my opponent. I had more plays than my opponent. I would just run over people and they didn't even know what happened. And I was like, oh, yeah, I get why people are paying a lot of money for these good decks. This is kind of fun.
Okay, I agree 100% for your vision about this aspect of the game. I think that you are not allowed to shitstorm on player who play an actual good deck because of your personal failure. From the chat, they ask 2 questions that are strictly linked each other. So what was your your favorite events, and what was your favorite format?
I'm not sure that those are the same thing. I guess that they could be, but my favorite event was the national championships in 2018 that I won with my Burning Abyss deck. So I loved that event because I completely built my own deck. It wasn't like I'd had inputs from other people. It was one of the events where everything that I put together was my own thought, was my own plan. And I guess that's kind of the casual mentality that I suffered from earlier, is I always wanted to win it my way, and I was handicapping myself. But this was kind of me vindicating my earlier dreams by, after I had failed with my own decks and then succeeded with the meta, I then went back and was able to succeed with something that I had completely made myself against a format where everyone thought I was the underdog. Because this was a format full of Gouki, Trickstar Sky Strikers.
Yeah,
I
remember.
And I just turned up with Sekka Burning Abyss with Rescue Cat to make Naturia Beast. No one had seen that before. And it was really exciting that I was finally able to kind of get that dream moment for the casual scrub of rocking up. I was that guy that turned up with my own deck and wiped the floor with everyone.
I think that your deck in the Nationals is one of the best example of competitive advantage in deck building. I think that's with your deck was a strong meta call when you find the perfect deck for the event.
Yeah, and then I think that event was also my birthday, and my girlfriend was there, so everything was just great.
Like, yeah,
everything came together perfectly.
I think you deserve it, by the way. And
but I haven't said about my favorite format.
Oh yeah, sure.
I think my favorite formats to play were mostly long before that. I really liked the Dino Rabbit format before Insectors and Windups. So Insectors and Windups kind of made it turned me off from the game a lot, because that was the first time that I felt like I was struggling more than I had been before.
Okay.
So previously to that, I'd always been getting better. I'd always been finding that my silly Blackwing deck could still compete, and I could tech things so that I was able to compete even with the Dino Rabbit decks. And then Insectors show up and there's nothing that you could do. That was a really bad time in the game to try and play a rogue deck, because Dino Rabbit was still really strong, but Windups got rid of every card in your hand, and Insectors destroyed every card on your field. So there were too many good decks that there was nothing that you could do to try and combat the one best deck.
Okay.
So it really hurt me. But just before that was a perfect time as a casual player to try and overcome the best decks of the format. And that's what I liked doing back then.
Okay. And one other question from me this time. Who is the player that you feel he has inspired you most?
Okay, that's a really good question. There are several players that I have seriously looked up to over the time. So first, going longest back would be Ping Zhao. So I'm on the same team as him now, and we're very good friends. But when I first came to locals, he was the guy that ran my locals. So as like a really young teenage kid with an awful deck showing up for the first time, the guy that runs the whole tournament, he would play for Swiss, and then because he was the tournament organizer, he would pass down his position if he made it to Top Cut and let other people play out for the prizes. But he was always doing really well, and he was running everything, and he was already traveling to events. So like instantly this guy was like a mentor in the game, because he knew all the rulings, and I just wanted to be able to play like that. After that, when I started playing a bit more competitively and following the events, I really looked up to Simon He as the first player from the UK who traveled not just in Europe, but also went out to America. And it seemed like every event that he would go to, he would be making the top cut and he'd be running deep. And just to be able to do that so consistently at every single event was incredible. So I would always follow the coverage and look out for him. And then more recently, I guess, or not necessarily more recently, but Joshua Schmidt has always been literally incredible. I've never understood how a man can play through so many formats and be so consistent. And then, moving to more recently, I now most look up to Jonas Koschel and Din Kaubui because they have incredible form. They're both really humble, great guys. I always make a point of stopping and chatting to them every event that I go to because they're just really chill. And I have so much time for anyone that is a super chill person, even when you're playing against them, and still has that incredible performance every single event. So anyone that can be that kind of a character and not be pushing for, so like, I would disbelieve it if anyone said that they were being sharked by these people, because that's just, I've never even come close to having that kind of experience with them. They're just such nice players, and to be what I consider to be like the cleanest player in the room and still be topping every single event is incredible. And that's kind of what I try, and that's what I look up to myself. That's who I want to be in the game. So I've always aspired to be like that kind of person.
I've ever thought that when people said, the pro player are sharking, they are, like we said 1 minute ago, they are like hiding their incompetence, I think. Because there is for me, and this is this is why I have I took you here. I personally think that if always the same name tops, there is a there is a cause about this. It's not there are some constants. And one question from the chat that is it is why I'm switching my side to one side to the other, is that one of our players from our chat said that he took his first stop to a counter meta deck, with a counter meta deck, and now he passed with to Emancipator, that is clearly one of the tier 1. And his question is about any advice when you play the best deck, or the perceived best deck, I want to add, and all the room main deck hate for you.
Okay, that's a really interesting one. If you are playing the best deck, your technical play has to be perfect. So not only is everyone in the room main decking hate for you, everyone in the room has practiced against your deck, and a lot of the people in the room are also playing your deck, and some of them are playing it better than you are. So if you want to play the best deck, you need to have some kind of idea how you're going to be better than them. So on the one hand, I've already said you need to have perfect technical play to do that, but also, if possible, you need to find a way to give yourself an advantage over everyone else that's doing that same thing. So that can be tech cards that help you beat the mirror match. That can be things in your extra deck that people aren't expecting that might be a good counter to what you're expecting to see. You just need to find some kind of niche that lets you outperform the other people that are trying to do the exact same thing as you.
In one of my lessons in this podcast, I took a lot of focus on what is the importance of a competitive advantage in deck building, because deck building is the area when you have the most control, so when you can invest And I think that what Thomas said is very important to you, because everyone have to acknowledge that if everyone in the room play kind of good, they know about roughly 80% of your deck experience. So you cannot put your chance on only 10-20% of advantage. You have to take the largest advantage you can.
Yeah.
The next question, in your opinion, what is defined by a pro player to above average or a slight above average player?
Okay, so there are a few things that define the difference. I guess there's two questions there. There's one is, what is the difference? And there's another one that's, how can you tell which person you're playing against? So I guess I'll probably answer those a little bit separately. The difference between an above average player and a really top player is that the really top player plays well, but they aren't just playing themselves well. They have an understanding of what's going on everywhere. So they are thinking not just about what they have, but they're thinking about what their opponents have. And they'll often be going beyond that and thinking about what their opponents interpret about what they have as well. So they're kind of levels above in terms of comprehension of what's going on at the table. And less good players, if they try and do that, get confused and make mistakes. So having the clarity of mind to be aware of everything that's going on, still make good plays and make good reads and make good bluffs, all under the pressure of a tournament situation, and not miss anything. Every truly top player, they will sometimes make mistakes, but they will instantly know exactly what the mistake was, and they'll be thinking, okay, how do I get myself into the best position now? And even if they are in a losing situation, either through their own mistake or just through luck of the draw, they will still be not tilted. They'll be level-headed, thinking, all right, what is the last possible way that I could win this game? What is the answer? Even if I don't think there's an answer, what would the answer be if there was one? And always looking for that out, looking for the exact lethal that hadn't been noticed. I'm down on card advantage. How do I win this turn? All of those kinds of things, rather than just a lot of the above average players will just learn sort of how to react to situations that come up frequently. So an above average player might have tested a lot of games, and they'll remember, oh, it happened like that last time I played it, so I'm going to play it like that, rather than fully analyzing each situation independently and making sure that they pick up on all of the little clues to optimize every single choice.
Okay, so you think that the above average player doesn't have the ability to transfer to do like an inductive reasonment, so they can't take the experience to catch some general rules.
I think above average players will typically play every situation as it looks like the previous ones that they've encountered, and won't necessarily pick up on subtle differences, or won't know how to react to just little things like if your opponent hesitates when you declare an effect, they won't necessarily work out right away what that hesitation means and what they're going to do about it and adjust their play accordingly. I think that's the kind of thing that takes you from being above average to being sort of dominant over the person on the other side of the table, where it almost gets to a point where, and I haven't had it this way for a while now, but there have been times where I feel like I'm playing both sides of the table. I play my own cards, and then my actions will force my opponent to play their cards back at me, and I'm kind of choosing how I want them to play their cards and doing actions to force that to happen.
Yeah, clear. So let we get more deeply into the tournament preparation topic. So the first question I ask to you is more general. Is the more general question I have to you. So how do you prepare for a tournament? Like hours of testing, testing partners, testing modes, and because one of the most frequent question in the chat is how Thomas Rose prepare an event. He tests like 10 hours a day, or he don't test and has some magical trick that can lead him to win events. I don't know.
If
you want
I
to-
do well at an event, it's because I've played a lot of events. I don't do nearly enough testing outside of events. I don't like dueling book, and I don't make enough time to test in person. So for the season, which was, I guess, 2018 to 2019, when I was chasing world points,
Yeah.
I didn't test really. I played 1 hour a week on stream with my friends, and I played 1 or 2 events every single weekend. But I was just playing so many events that each event was my testing for the next event.
Okay.
And I would be busy with work in between, and I would still message my friends to discuss theory, but I wouldn't have time to actually play any games other than tournaments. So I'm not saying that's a good way to try and prepare for events. I don't think that works for most people. It only works if you have played loads and loads of time. Like this is, at that point, I've been playing the game competitively for 8 years. So I had loads of experience just playing events. And I was also playing multiple tournaments every single week in competitive environments to the point where it was just second nature. Certainly a long, long time ago, I used to test a lot more, but I guess life kind of gets in the way.
Yeah, I think about it every time. And so how much important is the day zero of a WCS? Your opinion, the Friday night, the Friday
Okay.
morning and Friday afternoon and so on.
I've always been the person that has their event planned out long before that. I don't fly to an event without knowing what deck I'm going to play. I'll still make some decisions about tech choices. So the Friday in the daytime, I'll scout the room, see what everyone's talking about. Because just hearing what everyone is worried about kind of dictates what's going to happen on the weekend. You can get an impression of what's really popular. You look at the vendors, you see what's going up in price. Lots of people will be playing it if it's expensive, because the only reason the prices go up is because everyone's trying to buy it on the Friday.
Yeah, sure.
So I get some impression of what the meta breakdown is going to be, but I always register my deck on the Friday so I can just relax on Friday night. I don't like having to get up early on the Saturday morning. I would rather lock in my decision and just relax. Just take it easy, go out for a walk, have some, like, leave the venue early enough on the Friday night to go out and have a proper dinner, sit down at a restaurant, eat slowly, and go to bed early, rather than some people staying up really late into the night, scribbling out deck lists, crossing things out, rewriting. I don't think that works for me. I think that if I try and do that, I will be unrested on the Saturday, and that makes me nervous. And even if I had a slightly better deck, I'll lose more games to being tired than I win by having a slight improvement on my deck list.
Okay, very clear. And how do you, when you have enough time to testing, how do you organize your testing? So outside of how many hours do you invest in your testing? That is, I think it's depending of your schedule, weekly schedule on work, study, and so on. My question is, do you play, because a lot of people confuse the aim to victory in testing to the aim to learn in testing. So how you learn when you test? Do you have some testing tips, testing clue that you can give to our community?
So I still fall victim to the classic blunder, as you say, of playing to win when I'm playing a test game. And that doesn't necessarily always give the best results. But the important distinction there is if you and the person that you're testing with are playing to win, you need to stop after every single game and talk about what happened and why it happened, rather than just playing out the game to see who wins. If something happens, you need to go back and say, okay, let's look at this situation again. What happened there? What could have been done differently, and what would the impact have been if it had done differently? So even if you can't motivate yourself to go through what I would consider to be the proper testing procedure, where you set up scenarios and you run through test cases and you draw specific hands to see what plays out in each particular occasion, that's fine. You still get value out of playing games to try and win. You just need to make sure that you're extracting as much value as possible out of every single game, instead of just playing it for the sake of winning.
Yeah, thank you. And a question from the chat. How can you keep the concentration, the focus on what you're doing, even when the things are going wrong and you don't acknowledge why you are so prepared, you're so focused, and it seems that always all goes wrong, and you don't know how to deal with it. And how do you deal with it?
Okay, so there's a few things going on there. One is just experience. I used to get so nervous at events. I still do sometimes, but a lot less so now. I remember my very first YCS, I wasn't even a competitive player. I wasn't challenging for the top tables. I think at my first ever YCS, I went 1-3, dropped, and played side events. But for those 4 rounds that I played in the main event, I was shaking the whole time. I was sweating. I didn't know what I was doing. And that was 10 years ago now, maybe only 9, but it was a long time. I played more YCSs than I know since then. I honestly don't know how many I've played. I think it must have been like 30 or something. And over that time, you just kind of get used to it. And the other thing that happens with having played so many events is nobody remembers the events that you didn't do well in. It just doesn't matter. Like, nobody is going to be looking back and seeing, oh, that event, this guy didn't top it, because most people don't top events. Most people don't top every event. Just because you've had a bad day, it doesn't define you as a player. It doesn't. I've probably dropped from more YCSs than most people have played.
Okay. I think it's a good motivation for all the players.
And like, there's always going to be another event, so just don't take it too hard. That said, once you have that mentality of it doesn't have to be your day, there's always another opportunity, that's a step towards being in a position where you can remain calm in that awful situation, and you can do exactly what I was saying about what the best players do earlier on, is you can be in a losing position. And even now I can think of so many times that I've been in exactly this situation where It's game 3. I'm in a really bad place on the board. My opponent has everything. I have nothing. And I'm just there like, guess they win. I should probably just scoop. But it's game 3. There's no point in scooping. Let's play it out. Let's think, can I imagine a situation where I win this game? What has to happen for that situation to come true? Is there anything that I can do to maximize the chance of that? So there was a game in YCS London a couple of years back. It was round 1, and I was losing. And I knew I was playing a Burning Abyss deck, going second with Kaijus, no hand traps. I was locked down under a Dark Law, and I essentially had one more turn. I could set a blocker so that I didn't take loads of damage. We were getting quite close to time, but I was already down a little bit. And so blocking some damage wasn't going to be worth anything. And I just thought, okay, the only way that I ever win this game is if I draw a Kaiju next turn, and then I can Kaiju the Dark Law and make my plays and go off. So I'm not going to set anything, because if I set anything, I don't have any resources. I just have to hope that he doesn't have more plays in hand to put more attack on the field, and pass turn with an open board. So I pass turn, open board. He doesn't have anything. He doesn't summon anything. He attacks me. I drop down to like 1,000. My turn. I draw the Kaiju. This was a game that 3 minutes ago I was thinking of scooping, and I was trying to look at ways to not lose. And I thought, okay, what is the only out I can have here? And I played to that one possible condition, and I got lucky, and it worked, and it came through. I Kaiju'd the Dark Law. I had 2 Gallus in hand. I did some damage. I summoned a bunch of stuff, and I was able to kill him on that turn. And it was a game that a lot of people would have felt that they were out of and mentally retired. I see a lot of people get into a losing position, and up here, they've already given up. They aren't playing to win anymore because they think they've lost. So you need to just remain calm, know that it doesn't matter if you lose, but also work out if there is any way that you might not lose, and do everything that you can to try and get to that situation.
Yeah, I think that the epiphany when I turned from a player that is always nervous to a calm player is when I found that you don't take any advantage to don't be calm. So why you have to be nervous? So if it doesn't give you any sort of advantage, what is the point to be nervous or to be frustrated? There is simply no point. And when you accomplish this like Zen situation, I think that the most part of the psychological management is done, I think. I don't know what is your opinion about this.
I definitely agree with everything that you're saying, but for anyone that's watching and thinking, oh, just don't be calm, if only it was that easy, it's not an easy thing to do at first, and it does take a lot of time. So don't feel disheartened if you are nervous at every event, because everyone starts off nervous at every event. It's kind of weird if you aren't nervous if you're trying to be the best that you can be, because like you'll have practiced a long time and put a lot of effort into this. It's natural to be nervous, and if you just give it more time, give it more events, it'll come. You'll calm down and you'll get used to it. Everyone does.
Yeah. A question from the chat. You've ever been sharked in an event, and how did you react? My personal translation of this question is, how do you have to react when something not clean goes on?
Okay. Yeah, I've been sharked plenty of times. There are always going to be players like that. It's really unfortunate, and there have been times where it's absolutely destroyed me. So I know that in the first constructed YCS that I ever topped, my first loss in that event was to a player who sharked me awfully in the last round of day one. We were both undefeated at the time, and it just felt so unjust. I think I must have been 16 years old at the time. The other guy was a lot older than me. He had a big crew of friends. They were all standing around the table. We were at like table 1 or 2 or something towards the end of the day. And they were all shouting. I didn't understand. I don't remember what language they were even speaking, but I didn't understand it. And this guy was just lying about the game state. And I didn't understand what was going on. And I was so young. I had no idea. I didn't call a judge soon enough. I didn't do anything right at the time because I hadn't experienced that. I hadn't spent enough time at or near the top tables of a YCS. I didn't know what to do. Looking back, it's a situation that I would have handled very differently, both because I am physically older and larger and I don't feel so intimidated by like an adult sat on the other side of the table, but also because I'm more experienced in knowing when something's a bit dodgy, and if I feel like my opponent is trying to take advantage of something, I'll just call a judge.
Yeah.
I am very happy to just raise my hand and be like, Judge, would you mind watching this table for a moment? Because I don't have anything to hide. So if I've got a witness, they can quite happily watch everything that I'm doing. It's only going to mean that there's somebody that was there to see anything that happens if something happens. So if you ever feel like you're getting a really bad feeling and you feel like your opponent is trying to cheat, just get a judge to come over and ask specifically if they could just watch the table for a little bit. And like a lot of the time that will seriously chill out most situations. But I still have people try and do unscrupulous things against me even now. And yeah, I guess I'm much happier to call a judge. I have very comprehensive knowledge of the rules of the game and the rules of tournaments. So I'm comfortable in what's going on. I know what to look out for. And I will always make sure that I have the support of the event staff if I feel like I need it. And it's important to remember that there are judges for a reason, and they are there. You just need to call on them. They can't help you if you don't call for them.
Okay. Move to to another topic of tournament preparation. Confirmed by your personal history, you seem a player that always choose one deck and take this deck to the top. And my personal question is the fact that you usually choose one deck for a season, for 2 or 3 big events, is an emotional choice, but I don't think so. Or is there is some thinking about the choose of some advantage on choosing one deck and to take it to some events, just to 3 or 4 events in a row?
Okay. Yeah. So there is definitely an advantage. It doesn't mean that it's always the correct choice, but there is an advantage. This also ties in really nicely with what I was saying about the difference between an above average player and a really great player. So to be able to be a really great player, you have to be able to know every situation and to be able to play every slight nuance difference between this situation and the last one. And that takes loads of practice. To get to that level of technical play with a deck takes so many hours. The very best players will put in loads and loads of hours with every deck. So there are people out there who would be able to play any of the meta decks in the format to a really good standard, but they have to put in so much time to get there. And like I said, when you were asking about event preparation, I don't do enough event preparation. The only way that I can get to that level of play is by playing a very similar deck every single week.
Okay, got it.
I build up the bank of knowledge and experience with that one deck by playing it for months at a time, so that I play it without even thinking about what I'm doing. I'm thinking about what they're doing.
Okay, perfect. So you're saying that if you are in a situation when you don't have enough time to test like what is usually defined as pro player, it's a good choice to choose one good deck, obviously, because you can optimize the time that you put and the efforts that you put in.
Yeah. Obviously, you have to reconsider if you find yourself in a situation where the deck that you have chosen is underperforming. But for so long as you are near the top of the game with that deck, I would always personally be very reluctant to move on unless I had a lot of time to commit to getting to that same level with a different deck.
Okay. And so one methodological question. So a new format, a new banned appeared. So there is a big change in the game. What are your steps in defining what is the current best deck, what deck choose, what change put in your deck? So I think that when a great change appears in the Yu-Gi-Oh world, you are prepared in not with an habits, but with a system that you apply in every format to be so consistent. And what is this system?
Okay, so the first thing that I always consider when there's a list is what was the best deck before? And unless you can look at the ban list and say definitively that deck now sucks, it's still top tier. And I find a load of players completely misinterpret this all the time. And they will see things like, oh, Nightmare Mermaids got banned, Orcust can't be played anymore.
Yeah.
And then Orcust is still the deck that everyone plays because it's still so strong. And I think that is one of, if not the biggest mistake, is discounting the old top tier just because they got hit.
Okay.
Like Salamangreat has been hit, and then again, and it's still a really good contender right now. So unless something happens that you can definitively say this deck is dead, it's still good.
Okay, perfect. And you can continue, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. And then I guess what I would do when I'm looking at decks for the new format is first work out what's still good, and then work out what beats it. And I want to be the guy that beats what's still good.
Okay, perfect. So you choose like a kind of anti-meta
a little
choice.
bit, yeah.
Okay, and one question for the chat. Is it okay to have a deck type preference? I've always liked control, but I forced myself to branch out and try to learn every deck, but I don't like that.
Okay, this is a really interesting discussion. The whole idea of a play style, a lot of the time, not all of the time, but a lot of the time, it's only something that is used by players who aren't that good. And
yeah.
I know that some people will hate me for saying it, but just because you aren't the best player in the room doesn't mean that you can't do well. The first step to doing well is often working out how good you are. So if a player says they prefer control decks, a lot of the time it's because they might have played a combo deck and they don't have as much success with it. If we take an obvious example of this kind of thing, True Draco is often seen to be an easier to play deck. So a lot of people give it a bad rep because it's easy to play. But for some people, if you know that you don't do well with combo decks and OTKs, the correct choice for you is to play something like True Draco that is easier. And as much as it might seem rude or insulting to say maybe you're just not that good, the best way to get better is to sometimes accept that you aren't that good at combo decks and play something that gives you personally the best chance. The best deck for each person isn't necessarily the same, and whether or not you want to call it a play style or not is up to you. But there is some merit in saying you need to play a deck that you can play well, because nobody is going to win the event if they don't know how to play their deck at least a bit. Like, I know that there have been plenty of times where somebody's been like, I don't know how I won that event. I messed up the combo or something, but they'll still have played well. That you can't win an event without doing well.
Yeah, sure. One thing about this is that I argue that play style doesn't exist in a game. It's there is always the better play, the better deck build, the perfect deck build, or something near. And I think that winning or at least stopping is all about give you the better option you can afford. And playing the best deck for your situation, your context is one way to give you the best options.
Yeah, never try and play a deck that you feel overwhelmed by, because you won't play it well enough.
Yeah, so you don't give you the kind of advantage you need to win or top an event. One cool question about deck building that is personally my favorite aspect of the game. And I run some 2 lessons on cards in terms of roles, so starter, extender, additional extender. Do you use that division of roles, that assessment of roles, or you have some other clues on deck building? What do you think about deck building in general? So what do you think is important to acknowledge?
I definitely do use those same sort of card roles. I think myself and a lot of my friends, we read Patrick Hoban's book Road of the King when that came out, and it helped a lot, for one, in giving some advice in how to do deck building, but the one that sticks with us more is labeling the cards, giving them names so that we can talk about it and we know how to discuss these things, and we can use the terminology to have the conversation more easily. I don't think that everything that was written in that book is still relevant today. It was great at the time, but it hasn't all aged that well. But the foundations that laid were fantastic. And certainly starter cards is probably the part of deck building that has stayed the most true. So starter cards and engine requirements are still the cornerstones of how to evaluate consistency when deck building. And I use hypergeometric calculators. It's just an online tool where I'll put in numbers of how many starters am I playing, how many cards in deck am I playing, because if anyone's followed the kind of deck list that I play, they are very regularly not 40. I know that Patrick Hoban's book was all about finding the right number of cards for a deck, and at the time that was almost always 37. But I feel that the game has changed to a point where having more cards in deck isn't nearly as much of a disadvantage now as it was then.
Okay. I think I have the same thing of you, because in modern game there are a lot of cards that absorb multiple roles. So you actually play a deck that is built. I refer most of combo decks. You play a decks that have so many extenders that are also removal, defense, and so on, that you can raise your card count in some decks to have the same chance, if not better chance, to compete and have a good deck.
Okay, so that's one side of it. The other side for me is the ratio of random card scene to controlled card scene. So every time you draw a card or mill a card or banish a card face down, that is a random card. You haven't chosen what that is. It just comes off the top of the deck and it was shuffled beforehand. Every time you activate an effect that searches your deck or summons from your deck or lets you look at the deck and send something to the graveyard, that's a controlled event. And controlled events are better the more options you have. So if I am activating the effect of Armageddon Knight, that effect gets stronger the more dark monsters I have in my deck that do something good. But every time I draw a card for the start of my turn, that it's not like a card effect, but that action gets stronger the fewer cards that are in my deck, because it increases the consistency of what I see. So when you look at different decks, you'll see that some decks have lots of controlled events and some decks have fewer control events. And so by comparison, they have more random events. So a deck like True Draco, you want to keep the deck count as low as possible, because most of the time you're drawing cards. You draw cards with Card of Demise, you draw cards at the start of the game, you draw cards with True Draco Heritage or Disciples. You even a card like Pot of Duality, you don't get to look at your whole deck. So increasing the consistency of those top 3 cards, even though it's kind of like a search, it's not a controlled search. So for that kind of list, you always want to have the minimum number. But in a deck like Orcust, where so much of, particularly the Orcust from 2019, so much of the time you are looking at your deck and choosing a card to resolve an effect, that more cards means more options.
Okay. A question from the chat is how do you determine what probability is good enough for you? That's kind of arbitrary. There's
an amount of arbitrariness to it, but so the exact number isn't something that you can say this number is good enough, but you need to look at the format as a whole, evaluate how much you need to guarantee that you resolve that first turn combo, and go from there. If not resolving your first turn combo means that you lose the game, then you need to push the chance of resolving it as high as possible. But if you're in a format where it doesn't matter if you don't resolve the combo because you get another turn, you get another chance, then you can start building a bit more defensively. You don't need to maximize those percentages, and you can just sort of work out a balanced deck breakdown, possibly have more things to compensate for lost die rolls or something like that. It's very much an analysis that has to be done on a format by format basis due to the situations that you're actually going to find yourself in.
Okay. Do you have some tips for the guys that are following us to determine what is the best deck in the format? You don't even know what perfectly what is going on in these days, but I think that if you are going to play now for a an event, if it is possible, the first thing you do is acknowledge what is the perceived best deck, what is the real best deck, and what is the most popular deck. Have you any tips to define what are these situations?
Okay, so there's a website, YGOscope, which takes data from Dueling Book, and it gives you a breakdown of what people are playing online. Generally speaking, what people are playing online now is what people will be playing in paper events in about 1 or 2 weeks. So the deck breakdown from Dueling Book, the weeks immediately before the event, are the best idea that you can get as to what you'll be playing against.
Okay.
Once you know what you'll be playing against, you need to decide how that defines the rules of the format. So if people are playing counter traps, you need to know that you need a way of either playing through counter traps or ignoring counter traps. If people are if everyone is making Appaloosa, then you need a way of playing into a board with an Appaloosa. If people are summoning Winder, then you need to have outs to Winder or a deck that doesn't care about Winder. So you just look at, in the most general terms, what the good decks are doing and what you need to be able to beat. Because if you can't beat all or at least most of the popular decks, you're going to lose.
Okay, perfect. One question outside Yu-Gi-Oh! How many time have you left for us? So we can adjust our questions.
I've got 20 more minutes.
20 minutes, okay. So another question from me at this time is how can you incorporate the variance into your deck building or your technical play?
Okay, so variance is another part which is very useful when you're preparing for an event. If you are the best player in the room, probably want to minimize variance. If you're prepared to admit that you aren't the best player in the room, then you don't want to get rid of it, because unless there's variance, you aren't going to beat the best player in the room. So it's another one of those situations, like when you're choosing the difficulty of your own deck, where you need to properly analyze how good of a player you are yourself. And that can vary from event to event. I know that even for me, I am not the same amount prepared for each event. And if I'm not going to be that good, then I'm more likely to go into an event with something like main deck Nibiru, because if I get lucky and I get played against decks that lose to Nibiru, it'll give me free wins. And I might need that. I might be unprepared for the event, and I need to use variance as an advantage to give myself the best chance of winning. If I thought that I was only 50% to win every single game, then minimizing variance is only going to guarantee that I don't top.
Okay, because I think that an average result is not topping, because most of the room doesn't top. So
yeah, and unless you are convinced that you are in the very top percent of the room, then you will need some variance to be in that top cut. We see European YCSs, they're huge now. We're getting, or at least before we had events close to 2,000 players, and that size of event is the hardest to top out of any size YCS. It's just below 2,000 players where you still only have a top 32 cut, but you have to play through 11 rounds, and I think it's 2% or something of people. I think it's about 2% of players in that room.
Yeah, probably
will make the top cut. So you either need a significant deck building advantage or some good luck.
Yeah, and there is a nice anecdote to this. My personal story when I took my only premier event, that was Milan in 2018, and I was a significant less, not less good, but less aware player that I am now.
Okay.
But I took the pure Thunder Dragon. That was simply my favorite deck because I love Thunder Dragons. I put some Brilliant Fusion and Phantom Sky Blaster in my deck because one friend suggested me, and I did. I thought, well, it helped me to get Saryuja and get my side deck. I think it's very good. It's good in mirror match. That we include this. And I thought only, I acknowledged this 2 years later, only because I was playing the right deck. I was playing with a competitive advantage, even if I wasn't aware of this. And I were very lucky because my game plan was not take any Sky Striker because I wasn't prepared, and I took only 3 Sky Strikers and I lost to every of them, one in top cut. It was a mixture of good variance, good deck building, but not aware of this, and probably a good and repeatedly not aware deck choice. So I completely agree with you.
Yeah. Congrats on getting the top. Like, that's a really big achievement in the modern game. So I think you've correctly identified that if you're not the best player at the event, you can't bring the same deck that everyone else is bringing, because unless there's a reason for you to top, you aren't going to.
Yeah. And one other question for me is a little bit difficult, I I think, but I'm convinced that you can answer properly. So, what is for our audience, assignment of roles in a game?
Okay.
So the typical control and beat down roles in a game state.
Okay, so this comes from a very old Magic the Gathering article. I can't remember the original author, but I understand that they wrote quite a lot of theory articles about Magic. The original article was called "Who is the Beatdown?" and it's about whenever you go to a table, you need to decide whether you or your opponent is more likely to win the longer the game goes on. So if we look at some recent decks, there have been formats where you might find yourself as an Orcust player playing against an Altergeist player. And in that kind of matchup, the short games get won by Orcust and the longer games get won by Altergeist. The Altergeist player has so much inevitability once they've established the looping with Manifestation and Silquitus, and if they are resolving their effects every single turn, they just get more value than you can possibly deal with, all the while you run out of cards in your extra deck to threaten anything. So in that situation there, the Orcust player is the beatdown. So the player who is the beatdown wants to find any way that they can to end the game as soon as possible, because they know that every turn that they don't end the game, the task gets harder and less likely to happen. I don't necessarily feel like the entire concept always applies to Yu-Gi-Oh! I think right now, the current format with the Adamanticators and the Eldritch is probably quite a good one to be evaluated by who's the beatdown, because the Adamanticator deck only has 2 or 3 turns of resources in its deck and its extra deck to really make pushes and set up that position. So if you are an Eldritch player and you can survive for 3 of your opponent's turns, you've probably won that game, because you're still going to be reusing the resources in your graveyard. You'll be setting everything up, setting new cards. So right now, it's a really relevant format. So I definitely encourage anyone that hasn't read the original article to search it out. It's available online. Who is the Beatdown? And just whenever you find yourself at a table thinking about how do I win this game, it can be important to consider whether you are benefited or more likely to lose by taking a risk to try and end the game sooner. So yeah, once you've established what your role is, if you are the Beatdown, you don't necessarily want to wait for a guaranteed victory if you think that you have a chance of taking the kill now, because now maybe winning might be the best chance that you get. But if you're the control in that situation, you have no need to take a risk, because if you just try and sit on your resources and play it safe, you'll eventually come out on top. Now the counter side to that is some formats where both players are playing a deck with loads and loads of actions in every single turn. I think this is most commonly applied to combo deck mirror matches. You don't necessarily consider the game as beatdown. To me, those matches feel more like I don't know if it's called the same in Italy, but the game of Jenga. So wooden blocks stacked on top of each other. And you have to make the only move that is available to not collapse the tower. So everything that each player does is just as a reaction to the current situation. This is like diffusing a bomb so that I will be able to keep playing without dying to all of your negations, interruptions, and all of that. Now, oftentimes in those situations, if you can diffuse the field that your opponent has put up, the tools that we have now through things like Boral Sword will mean that if you do get through, you'll win the game anyway. But in those particular games, you don't always need to consider who's the beatdown, because you just need to make every move that you can to stay alive. And if you get to that battle phase with a board, then you win automatically anyway.
Okay. To take an example, even if it's not fair enough of this in this context, a clear example of this theory that I push you to go deep in was the only match between me and Thomas in Paris. I don't know if you even remember it. It was the Saturday events of the CFS in Paris.
Playing against Winnerlight?
Yeah. And I have a big advantage. My big advantage was that I know what he's playing. And so I know roughly his deck list. And I know that he doesn't know where I am. So, sorry. So I played a deck Lunalight that has a very good matchup if I go first, and I have to assume the role of control. So my first move in the game was to put Cheek. I had Cheek, Tiger, and Perfume. I took Cheek, Sun, Tiger, put the scale. Tiger
you defended on a dweller, right?
Yeah, in defense. So I don't even being beat by card like Super Poly or Lightning Storm, but if it has a very optimal hand, it can beat me. It was a risk. I acknowledged it, but the large majority of times I would win only because I don't give him advantage to take with the big down role. So my role was the control, and I'd assume it's completely, and was a good example for this kind of situation.
Yeah, absolutely. So in that situation, you had some knowledge going into it. So for anyone that wasn't aware, I was playing Burning Abyss, surprise.
Yeah.
And it was a very combo heavy deck, not like the one that I've been playing recently online with trap cards. It was all just monsters and spell cards to try and win as quickly as possible. So being stuck behind an Abyss Dweller basically just means that I can't win that turn. And you correctly identified that the Lunalight deck in that format, with the ability to recycle Tiger every single turn, had way more inevitability than me. So for every turn that the game went on, you would just accrue more and more resources that I wouldn't be able to overcome.
The last question, because we apart from, is linked to the to my little story, and is deceive information, good information from your opponent even before you start the game. How much is important? How much is important to mislead your opponent, and how much is important to catch every possible information to the opponent that's face to you?
If you do get free information, then it's pretty good. I know that there was a time where I would have been the annoying guy that sits down on the other side of the table, start asking questions, being like trying to work out everything that I can about the psyche of my opponent, asking questions about, hey, how's your tournament going? What have you lost to? And trying to work things out from that. But nowadays, I haven't got time for it. I know that when people do that to me, it feels really disingenuous. It's like they're trying to come across as just being chatty, but it always feels like they're plugging for information. And I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy that's nagging you about your tournament. I would rather take the approach that I will sit down. If my opponent seems like they might be a little bit chatty, then I'll just try and talk to them, because I think that for myself, there's more of an advantage of just trying to like get my opponent to relax and be in a position where they might not be like super competitively focused on the game. So I'm just gonna chat, and not only is it potentially an advantage, it's more fun.
Okay.
I've got to a point now where if I'm not having fun at every round that I'm playing, then why am I even playing? There's other things that I could be doing with my life if I'm not enjoying it.
Yeah, sure. I totally agree. So we came at the end of this stream. Thomas, I don't have words to thank you for not only for your availability, but for your competence, your comprehension of the game, and also for the humble to stay here with us talking about the game like everybody's in this virtual room, because all of us are passionate about this game. If not, we will not sit here. And even if you are a great player, you sat down, take you to our level and talk about game theory. That is very, very enjoyable time for us. So I hope you enjoyed the stream. I thank you so much, you and your team, Team Kuribrohs, that give every time good contents for not only for the Yu-Gi-Oh community, but also for the game communities, for everybody that likes game for the sake of gameplay. And I don't know if you have any last word, and obviously if you want to return here for some reasons, we were very glad to it. And I don't know if you want to finish this chat in some way. You are.
I guess thank you for all the kind words. You're too nice. It's been really chill being on here. Even though I'm not super active in the game right now, I don't find myself particularly compelled to play a lot online. I still have really had a great time just talking about card games. Even when I can't play, I love to discuss the theory behind it. So it's been really good fun. To anyone who's hoping that they can learn from this, I hope that I've been able to give you something that's useful, but more than anything, just keep playing, keep having fun, and make sure that you enjoy every single event that you get to play, because as much as success is great, I love doing well at events, you need to make sure that you're getting as much as you can out of the opportunities. It's so great that we are able to travel when we can and go and play in these tournaments. Just make sure that you don't miss out on any part that is the true community of Yu-Gi-Oh! Hanging out with your friends, hanging out with people that you don't know yet, and just making the most of everything that you get from the game. Because I guess through being stuck at home, I now realize just how much the game meant to me beyond just the cards on the table. So I really want to be thankful for everyone that makes the community as good as it is. Everyone that comes up and says hi whenever we're at a tournament. I appreciate the interactions that I have with you guys, and the Yu-Gi-Oh community wouldn't be the same without you. So thanks to all of you as well.
Perfect. So Thomas, you have the patience to be with us after the live, like 10 minutes. We will very thank you only for the 2 final words. We thank you finally for being here with us, to have the patience to be here like 2 hours, and we hope that you will find this interesting in the future. So thank you very much, and have a good night, and stay safe.